Hello everybody, it's Jabari here. When tourists visit sub-Saharan Africa, they often wonder, why are there no historical buildings or monuments? The reason is simple: Europeans have destroyed most of them. All we have left to go on are drawings and descriptions by travelers who had visited these places before their destructions. In some places, however, ruins are still visible. Many cities had been abandoned into ruin when Europeans destabilized regions economically and militarily. The ruins of such cities are still hidden. In fact, the biggest part of Africa's history is still underground. All quotes and excerpts found throughout this video can be found in books written by Robin Walker and P.D. Lawton. These two Pan-Africanists themselves have been heavily influenced by Walter Rodney, who wrote the book How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Many of the drawings are from the book African Cities and Towns Before European Conquest by Richard W. Hull. That book alone dispels the stereotypical view of Africans living in simple, primitive, look-alike agglomerations scattered without any appreciation for planning or design. In fact, at the end of the 13th century, a European traveler encountered the Great Benin City in West Africa, present Nigeria, Edo State. He wrote as follows: "The town seems to be very great. When you enter into it, you go into a great broad street, not paved, which seems to be 7 or 8 times broader than the Wormo Street in Amsterdam. The King's Palace is a collection of buildings, which occupies much space of the town of Haarlem, and which is enclosed with walls. There are numerous apartments for the princes, ministers, and fine galleries, most of which are as big as those on the exchange at Amsterdam. They are supported by wooden pillars, encased with copper, where the victors are depicted, and which are carefully kept very clean. The town is composed of 30 main streets, very straight and 120 feet wide, apart from an infinity of small intersecting streets. The houses are close to one another, arranged in good order. These people are in no way inferior to the Dutch as regards to cleanliness. They wash and scrub their houses so well that they are polished and shining like a looking glass." Sadly, however, in 1897, Benin City was destroyed by British forces under Admiral Harry Rawson. The city was looted, blown up, and burnt to the ground. A collection of the famous Benin bronzes are now in the British Museum in London. Part of the 700 stolen bronzes by British troops were sold back to Nigeria in the year 1972. Here's another account of the Great Benin City regarding the city walls. They extend for some 16,000 kilometers in all, in a mosaic of more than 500 interconnected settlement boundaries. They cover 6,500 square kilometers and were all dug by the Edo people. In all, they are 4 times longer than the Great Wall of China and consumed 100 times more material than the Great Pyramid of Giza. They took an estimated 150 million hours of digging to construct and are perhaps the largest single archaeological phenomenon on the planet. Moving on to another part of Africa found north of the forest zone but south of the deserts. In the 11th century, a kingdom by the name of Mali arose in this region. In the 14th century, one of its largest cities, known as Timbuktu, was 5 times the size of London and was the richest city in the world. Today, Timbuktu is 236 times smaller than London. It has nothing of a modern city. Its population is 2 times less than 5 centuries ago, impoverished with beggars and dirty street sellers. The town itself is incapable of conserving its past ruined monuments and archives. So moving back to the 14th century, the 3 richest places on earth were China, Iran, Iraq, and the Mali Empire in Western Africa. Out of all of these places, the only one that remained independent and prosperous was the Mali Empire. The whole of the Middle East, as well as China, were conquered, ravaged, and pillaged by Genghis Khan, who led the Mongol Empire. The richest man ever in the history of humanity, Mansa Musa, was the emperor of the 14th century Mali Empire, which covered modern-day Mali, Senegal, Gambia, and Guinea. At the time of his death in the year 1331, Mansa Musa was worth the equivalent of 400 billion US dollars. At that time, the Mali Empire was also producing more than half of the world's supply of salt and gold. When Mansa Musa went on his historic pilgrimage in the year 1324, he carried so much gold and spent it so lavishly that the price of gold fell for an entire decade. 60,000 people accompanied him on this journey. He also founded the Library of Timbuktu, and the famous manuscripts of Timbuktu, which cover all areas of world knowledge, were written during his reign. Witnesses of the greatness of the Mali Empire came from all parts of the world. Sergio Delmion, an Italian art and architecture scholar, wrote the following about this period. Thus was laid the foundation of an urban civilization. At the height of its power, Mali had at least 400 cities, and the interior of the Niger Delta was very densely populated. The Malian city of Timbuktu had a 14th century population of 115,000, 5 times larger than that of medieval London. National Geographic recently described Timbuktu as the Paris of the medieval world on account of its intellectual culture. According to Professor Henry Louis Gates, 25,000 university students studied there. Many old West African families have private library collections that go back hundreds of years. The Mauritanian cities of Chinguetti and Oudane have a total of 3,450 handwritten medieval books. There may be another 6,000 books still surviving in the other city of Walata, some which date back to the 8th century AD. In addition to these, there are another 11,000 books in private collections in Niger. Finally, back in Timbuktu, Mali, there are about 700,000, that's right, 1,000 books that still survive to this day. They are written in Mandi, Suki, Fulani, Timbuktu, Sudani, and of course Arabic. The contents of the manuscripts include math, medicine, poetry, law, and astronomy. They also included the world's first encyclopedia, which was developed 400 years before Europeans got the idea in the 18th century. A collection of 1,600 books was considered a small library for a West African scholar of the 16th century. Professor Ahmed Baba of Timbuktu is recorded as saying that he had the smallest library of any of his friends, only containing a meager 1,600 volumes. Concerning these old manuscripts, Michael Palin in his TV series Sahara said the Imam of Timbuktu has a collection of scientific texts that clearly show the planets circling the sun. They date back hundreds of years. It's convincing evidence that the scholars of Timbuktu knew a lot more than their counterparts in Europe. In the 15th century in Timbuktu, the mathematicians knew about the rotation of the planets, knew about the details of the eclipse. They knew things which we had to wait 150 and almost 200 years to know of in Europe, when Galileo and Copernicus came up with these same calculations and were given a very hard time for them due to their religious views during this time in Europe. The old Malian capital of Niani had a 14th century building called the Hall of Audience. It was a surmounted dome adorned with arabesques of striking colors. The windows of an upper floor were plated with wood and framed in silver. Those of the lower floor were plated with wood and framed in gold. Although not proven, there is strong evidence to suggest that Malian sailors may have made it to America in the year 1311 AD, 181 years prior to Christopher Columbus. An Egyptian scholar by the name of Ibn Fadl al-Umari published on this sometime around the year 1342. In the 10th chapter of his book, there is an account of 2 large maritime voyages ordered by the predecessor of Mansa Musa, a king who inherited the Malian throne in the year 1312. This mariner king is not named by al-Umari, but modern writers identify him as Mansa Abubakari II. All of these events were happening at the same period when Europe as a continent was plunged into a dark age, ravaged by plague and famine, its people killing one another for religious and ethnic reasons. Also guys, I just want to bring up, the writer of this article seems to compare Africa to Europe almost excessively, and I don't think it's in any way to, say, oh, Europeans this, Africans that. I think it's really just, Europe is usually the basis for what's normal. I mean, unfortunately, that's kind of just the way it is. The whole world's history, as its social norms, things of that nature, are based on European or Western standards. And comparing Africa to Europe just gives you a good perspective of, the level of development, or the level of, I guess you could say, height of civilization that you could find in Africa compared to, something that's familiar to us, which is Europe. And what this basically shows is that every culture has had their time where they shined, and their times where they were plunged into darkness. During Europeans' dark ages, Africa was experiencing its golden ages, and now that Europe is experiencing its golden ages, Africa is experiencing its dark ages. This is merely the first installment of a series. It's all going to be based on an article that I came across on siliconafrica.com. Other than bits of paraphrasing and a little bit of fact checking, it's pretty much been word for word straight from the article. So again, I really appreciate everything, and this is just one of many installments to this series because it's a pretty big beefy article that I got this information from. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, please go ahead and leave a like, and as usual, if you disliked it, just go ahead and do a dislike, but at the very least, please just tell me, what I could do to possibly make the video better next time, and I will be sure to take your feedback and criticism into consideration. Last but not least, guys, I just want to thank everyone for all of the kind words and support and just, really being there for me, just giving me a good following for all of my content. I really, really love what I do, and I really love sharing all of this information with you guys. So, one thing I just want to do to show my gratitude is to give away a free $20 Amazon gift card. However, I already had a goal to reach 1,000 subscribers before giving away any gift cards, so once that happens, one lucky subscriber out of my first 1,000 will receive an Amazon gift card worth $20. So if you like my content, or you want a good chance at winning this Amazon gift card, go ahead and click that red button and support my channel. Stay tuned for the next installment of this series, and as usual, thanks for watching.